Can you hear me, Katie?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. Morning, Don. Morning, Bob. Morning, Michelle.
Great.
Jennifer, Ross.
Good morning.
Just kind of wait for folks to get joined up here. Don, are you still smoke-free over in Bend? You're muted right now. Can't hear you.
We had a little bit yesterday and a little bit again today, but for the summer though, it's been pretty smoke-free.
It's been nice, hasn't it? It's been
Yeah, it's been very nice.
changed from last summer, that's for sure.
We have about another month to get through this.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the first day that the AQI hit 100, and at 100, you have to offer N95 mask to your employees that are working outside. So that was the first time this summer. So we feel pretty lucky we've gotten this far.
Yeah. Bob Kiefer, I should know this, but I forget. Where is home for you, or where are you signing in from?
Sisters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're in the same neck of the woods.
Yeah. I left Springfield 7 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see Don as much now as I did back then when I was working. And we're only 25 miles apart.
Yeah, maybe less.
Maybe. That's true.
I just figured you were like cleaning out your sock drawer or something all these days, Bob.
So, we got Central Oregon pretty well covered in this meeting. That's with Jen and Don and I.
Yeah, we do. Ross is going to have to pick it up to keep up with us.
Good morning, Ashley. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Katie, it's 10:02. Did you want to hang on for a couple more folks? Or
I bet you, it looks like we have a pretty good group, so I bet you can go ahead and get started.
okay, Michelle, did you have any introductory remarks at all, or?
Well, I am having, again, I don't know why I'm having computer problems. So I don't have my, I don't have the PowerPoint or the notes or anything like that, but basically what we're doing today. So we're convening the Rule Advisory Committee for the Local Government Grant Rules. And we're just really gonna, I think you should have received what was requested was the second draft of what we put together from last time. But I would like to start kind of just pick up where we left off. And then if there are questions or anything we want to revisit on the things that we sent out from the last meeting, then I'd like to go back just to make sure that we get at least one pass through the initial rules, if that makes sense. But we will address anything else on there. But yeah, I think, Mark, do you have the like a presentation or an agenda or anything like that that you wanted to?
Well,
Yeah.
just going to pick up right with what you just said. We want to pick up right where we left off last time, and I'll share my screen here to get back to the actual rules. And I'm going to be working off of the draft document that Michelle just sent out, so it should look the same as what you just reviewed. But I am going to pick up right where we left off last time, which is, interestingly enough, literally like the last paragraph. So we just need to cover like the last page or so, and then we'll jump right back to the top and work back through any of the revisions that we made from our first meeting up to this meeting. So.
And then I know that we have pretty much the same folks here, but it might be a good idea just to go around and just do a quick introduction, because we do have like Karen is joining us today, and yeah, I don't have my list to roll call though, unfortunately. So I'll start it off and then I'll pass it on to committee members just to quickly just say your name, and then we have that for the record as well. Again, same kind of housekeeping things. Please make sure you're muted if you're not speaking. And I think that's kind of the main housekeeping thing is just to try and keep background noise down. So I'm Michelle Spalise. I'm the manager of the Grants and Community Programs section at Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. And I will pass it on to Mark and we can go from there.
And I am Mark Cowan. I'm the grant program coordinator for the local government grant program and the county opportunity grant program. And I'm just going to call people off in the order that I see you on my screen so that we have everybody covered. Don Horton.
Yeah, I'm Don Horton. I'm the executive director for Bend Park and Recreation District. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bob Kiefer.
Good morning. I'm Bob Kiefer. I'm a board member at the Sisters Park and Recreation District and a retired professional in the field.
Thank you. Ross Hoover.
Hello, I'm Ross Hoover, Parks and Recreation Director at City of Tualatin.
Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Baher, and I'm an agency support specialist here at Oregon Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Jennifer Holland, Executive Director at Sisters Park and Recreation District.
Very good. Brian Carroll.
Brian Carroll, Lynn County Parks and Recreation Director.
Karen.
Hello, I'm Karen Littman. I am a grant coordinator for Oregon Parks and Rec.
And our welcome to Karen. She just joined our team. We're delighted to have her on board. Katie.
Hi, Katie Guthier with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. I do government relations and rulemaking.
And Steve Lambert.
Steve Lambert, Roads and Parks Director, Jackson County. I love being with you guys so much. I'm on vacation day today, and I got my vacation gear on, so my video's staying off, Mark.
Oh, come on. We want to see what the background is.
No baseball hat shots with me.
Well, boy, sorry that we're encroaching on your vacation, but happy vacation day to you.
No worries. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Hey, great. Okay. Let's get to the rules. I'm going to share screen here. Hopefully you are seeing the document on your screen now. Nope. Here we go. Now I should. How about now? Can you give me a nod if you're seeing everything okay? Great. Thank you. All right. Where we left off last time, we were just starting to discuss the makeup of the local government grant program advisory committee. And some of the changes that we've made here, all they really have to do with is how we go about or who we talk to, what organizations we refer to in recruiting these people. And
Mark,
we
before
left,
we get started, you might make it just a little bit bigger so that we can
certainly.
see it better.
How's that?
That looks great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. We left off with a brief discussion last time. We talked about this historically underserved community.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
And maybe I'm wrong, but I did note a different spot to start.
Where would you like
off
to start?
Well, I put a note in I just where I said resume RAC here. I want to say it was 7G, but maybe I'm incorrect about that if you have a different. Yeah.
Okay, so 7G would be right here.
Yeah, but maybe we already talked about that.
Well, I do think 7H is worth discussing again.
Okay.
Do we want language that's that restrictive, the area that's highlighted?
I mean,
I don't think it's that restrictive, to be honest. Because I think you've said in the rules or in your manual that you give people 30 or 60 days in the manual, but I'm saying I don't think that that's too restrictive from my point of view. As I said last time, I'd probably take it up to the last minute if I was still running these things. Right, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, that's not the thing that stands out to me about you, Bob, but.
Well, Michelle, you said we called that the Bob Kiefer rule.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
I think it's fine as well. I don't see any issue with it.
I would third that.
Okay.
I just have a question about it. If there's additional information required, is that just administrative, or would it have to go back to the rules committee if they've already met?
I'm sorry, Don, you mean when somebody requests an amendment, or I guess I'm not, is that what that question is in reference to?
So I guess if somebody amends if I read this right, if somebody amends their project and you're requesting more information, that just goes to staff at state parks, right? It doesn't go back to the rules committee or go back.
No. Yeah, that's an administrative action, and
Okay.
yeah, there's a number of things that we use to decide whether that's appropriate or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion before I move on? There was some discussion on this. I don't recall where we left off on this.
Yeah, we did not talk about this section yet. I don't think, I think that's where there were some comments about, I believe, the conversion requirements, but I think that was kind of what we said we would talk about if there are questions or concerns about this language today.
I did have some questions about, I think, the conversion language and the relating to the state programs versus being tied to the land and water conservation funds and having restrictions placed on people applying for grants, local government grant or county opportunity grant, as related to the local or land and water conservation fund program. I believe there's some language in there regarding that. And then I think the other thing also is because a lot of the counties have lease agreements with federal partners. The 25 years, I think the 25 years has been in there for a long time. I'm trying to trying to remember whether whether we had at some point maybe thought about trying to change that to 20 if possible, just because as soon as we sign that lease agreement, it's no longer valid, or we have to have a letter issued because we're going to be under 25 years. The day after it, we should, we've got or a couple of years after it or whatever, we're in a position of that the agreement, we've got to send a letter in saying that there's an intention to renew that lease.
If it's within 5 years of termination.
5 years, okay.
So that should cover that concern, I would think.
I think so. Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Okay.
And then as far as the question about, your concern from before, can you point out the specific language that you're concerned with? Because we don't really have anything in here that that kind of says what you were saying. I mean, we do require that that paperwork is submitted if there's an unresolved, if there's a conversion through either the local government grant program or the land and water program. It really is just limited to making sure that that the form has been submitted or some paperwork has been submitted, which is typically just what is now called a CNS form. And so it's a form that just describes, and that's required for any land and water, or I'm sorry, yes, for any land and water conservation fund conversions, we require a CNS form. We would, in the case of a local government grant conversion, we would have something similar that is just basically a description of what the conversion is, why it's necessary. There's a set of questions about, the circumstances around said conversion. And so we just need that initial process to start, is all that we're asking in this. So there's really nothing in here that says that. I don't think that that's a too difficult of a barrier to be able to access the grant programs.
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, I'm still under, I guess I look at it and say I can understand how it would be important for land and water conservation funds and making sure that you have all your paperwork and everything in good standing on a federal program, but why we're tying a locally funded program that really doesn't have anything to do with the feds, why we'd have to have federal paperwork taken care of to apply for local funding.
Well, I would say it is a federal program, and we do, in the recreation grant section, we oversee 5 grant programs, 2 of which are federal grant programs. And we are the pass-through agency, which means that OPRD is the agency responsible for administering all 5 programs, but we're responsible for administering LWCF. And so this is really not so much about the federal requirement, it's about the requirements to be eligible to apply to OPRD. And so if, for example, we do a technical review if somebody submitted an application and then we realized that they had a conversion issue that we've been trying to address, and we didn't have it on record, we didn't even have like I said, the beginning documentation submitted to us just describing what's going on. I just, as the responsible agency for Land and Water Conservation Fund, that's just a way for us to get that rectified before moving on to a application process. There's nowhere in here that says you have to have the conversion resolved, completed. It shouldn't really cost anything for the agency to submit that paperwork. It's not necessarily that big of a hurdle. So I guess I'm kind of trying to understand the concern there. Also, this part of the rule has been in place since the beginning of the program. So that hasn't been brought up in our other rulemaking, but I mean, it's fine for us.
Probably what triggered it for me was that I believe it's some of that language may have been added to the County Opportunity Grant program, which I know is different than this one. The fact that it's in here, and I come from a conservative county where our county leaders do not believe that they see the federal government as having enough reach into our programs, and that they shouldn't be given any reach into any of our programs that they're not involved in. Setting any requirements that we have to file any kind of federal paperwork in order to apply for local programs, from their standpoint, is not something that's appropriate. We're giving them an opportunity to potentially have a say, or have some kind of restriction placed on how we're doing business with a local program, even though they have no jurisdiction in that local program.
Yeah, so this is what we're saying, OPRD. It's not the federal government having reach with OPRD. So
I guess I understand that, but it's still tying federal related paperwork to a local program, and that's really where we're coming from on it. I just don't see how the two have much to do with one another. With the Land and Water Conservation Fund, yes, I can certainly see it, that make sure you have all your paperwork in place for that program. There is other language that gives teeth where in this program, if I remember right, we're under scoring criteria. It's how you've performed on other grant programs, and that to me is already in there. So there's a little bit of redundancy in there, but it's just something that could potentially be used in a way that I don't think is appropriate. So,
Brian, could I ask Mark to scroll down? I think the paragraph you're talking about is at the bottom of the screen, and we can only see the first couple of sentences.
Yep, it's 4 and 5 right there.
I guess to add on to what Brian's talking about, Michelle, what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, is that a grant applicant would only have to turn in a CNS form. Paragraph 4 seems to go far beyond an applicant only having to turn in a CNS form. It says pretty much that if you haven't submitted paperwork for review and approval, and for approval of an active conversion, there's a lot more paperwork and a lot longer process than a CNS form, you're not eligible. So to me, that could very easily be used to say, if you haven't finalized, done your EA, gone through that whole entire process for approval, then you're not eligible to apply. Are you saying that it's different than that?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't had an experience where we haven't let somebody apply, without that paperwork. And we review, approved for the conversion. So it definitely is the start of
Oh, unfortunately, Michelle froze on us there. If I can pick up where she left off there, on point 4, it says project sponsors that have not addressed or submitted documentation. I think that's the action right there, the way I interpret it, to the Department or National Park Service. And then it's on our side, once those documents have been submitted, for review and approval. So I don't know that approval necessarily has to happen on this. It sounds like I would interpret this as the sponsor just needs to submit the documentation up front.
If that's the case, Mark, I mean, I'll just be honest with everybody on the call. I'm not going to beat around the bush. We've kind of gone round and round with OPRD on this because we had we had an unfortunate incident with a conversion on the Bear Creek Greenway down here. And the Bear Creek Greenway is a very complicated land and water conservation fund program with hundreds of files that deal with hundreds of tax lots. And my concern is moving into the future as conversions inevitably happen, sometimes just from ODOT projects moving forward with interchange improvements, et cetera. My concern is the inconsistency on review and approval, or is it approval, is it review? And like we said last time we were on this call, everybody on this call might interpret it one way, but it says review and approval. If we're going to implement it the way that Michelle and Mark had suggested, which I agree with, that sounds very reasonable and fine, I would suggest striking out and approval. So you're submitting the documentation to the Department of National Park Service for review of an active conversion through the Land and Water Conservation Fund program.
Can you all hear me yet?
Can now, yes.
Okay. So project sponsors that have not addressed or submitted documentation to the department or to National Park Service. So they haven't done this for review and approval. They haven't done this. So it does say to the department or National Park Service. So clearly, if we say department or National Park Service, things don't get submitted to National Park Service until we're actually processing a conversion. So if you take that first sentence, project sponsors that have not addressed or submitted documentation to the department, then you would have to submit that to the department. And that the documents are for review and for approval, but it doesn't say in there that they must be approved. So obviously, if we're saying the department is sufficient, which is the department or the department level documentation is not the same as National Park Service. So how I interpret this is, hey, if you have a conversion and you've already submitted your initial your documents to the department, you're good. Or if you've gone the further step and they've been submitted to National Park Service, then you're good. So that's how I interpret it. We can make note of your recommendation or your suggestion on that.
Yeah, I would appreciate you making note of it at the minimum, because it's not clear language, and we don't have the option of submitting documentation to the National Park Service directly. It always goes through the department as a department liaison for the program. So the state liaison. So it's not as clear, in my opinion, Michelle, as it sounds, as you got to make it sound.
Okay, and so then I guess following up on this, and it sounds like you believe that how we're interpreting it sounds reasonable. I would just ask, so if we have to any of our grant programs, someone apply, a certain applicant apply, and they've had this issue, or they have some kind of compliance issue that's unresolved, what would your suggestion be on, not that would go in the rule, but do we just look the other way and say, yeah, we'll give you, opportunity to get access to more funding? Because all this, even local government grant program has a conversion requirement. And so I guess, do we just, short of just not doing anything, because we are responsible for all of these grant programs, I suppose I'm not sure what the...
From my standpoint, Michelle, what I'm looking for is, I just don't think a federal agency should have what's going on with a federal agency or a federal program, even though you're running it, shouldn't have any bearing on local funding.
Okay.
I believe what you're saying, absolutely. I'm not saying that if somebody has an issue, whether it be a conversion issue with a local government grant or a performance issue, you absolutely should have some kind of teeth in there that says, hey, you can't, if you got a problem with county opportunity grant or local government grant, you can't apply for other state funding until you resolve that. But federal programs and how the feds handle things sometimes can be particularly onerous. And to tie that to local funding and say, well, you can't apply even for local funding if you're crossways with a federal program, I just don't think that's, I just don't think that that's appropriate. I think you certainly should not, if you've got a problem with a federally funded program, that you're no longer should be allowed to apply for other federal funding. That makes sense to me. But the state and local and adding feds to that, to me, that just adds, de facto, you're adding some federal requirements to local government programs that I don't think should be there. I know a lot of people may say, hey, you're splitting hairs here, but to me, that's important, because there's a lot of folks that won't even apply for land and water conservation funds anymore because of how restricted those funds are.
Right. And so as the administrators of that program, we do have to have some way to, make sure we're in compliance. And if nobody is applying to LWCF, then So,
and like I said, I'm not saying that that's their decision, but that's why I don't think that if they have previous issues, then they should not be able to apply for land and water conservation fund. Or if you said you have 2 federally funded programs, and I know the Marine Board has some federally funded programs. I mean, to me, if you're crossways with a federally funded program and are not up to meeting all your requirements there, then you shouldn't be able to apply for federal funds. I just don't think that should be, whatever's going on with the federal should have anything to do with the state.
okay. Well, we will note that. Yeah, I think that Ashley's captured that in the notes. I think Mark has captured some notes there. So we will make a note of that. I think Bob Kiefer has his hand up.
So Brian, I usually agree with you about 95% of the time when we're in these here. I don't know that this is onerous, by mostly after what Steve said, if you took the word approval out of there, and just that people are making an effort to comply. It's a letter. It's making the effort, recognizing that they have that. And I don't see a major concern here about restricting people at that point. This may be the only grants that they go for, but they've got a major conversion that shouldn't have happened. If it was the ones that are dealing with ODOT and they're out of their control, that's different. But in this case, I guess I'm okay with what Steve suggested of moving the word approval out of that, and at least recognize they need to take steps to correct it, even if it's just the very initial step of filing to work with a department. But that's my 2 cents on that, Brian. But I understand where you're at. I just think that it's not onerous.
Thanks, Bob. Steve?
I was going to add to Michelle's question that she posed to the group. Michelle, I understand where you guys are coming from. I get it. But I just, to Bob's point, if there's some clarity in that language so that we all know the rules that we're talking about clearly for application of this, I would appreciate that, at least consideration. And sounds like you got that noted on multiple fronts. The problem is, all of us can very easily go solve conversions by buying a chunk of piece of property and just marking it down as park and recreation property. But you know as well as I know, Michelle, that it is not an easy process to solve these conversions. Folks often go through steps to propose multiple different properties only to be shot down by National Park Service, et cetera. So realizing that those of us that have these processes or haven't inherited these issues, it is a lengthy and very onerous and very complicated process to solve these conversions. So as long as the language is clear that we're working with you, but somewhere down the line, somebody can't interpret it as, hey, that conversion has to be solved, has to be approved by, National Park Service, et cetera, for you to apply for this. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, okay, well, so we will take those comments and see what we can come up with here. You know, we do have noted that the suggestion has been made to remove the word approval and have your comments on having more clarity. So we'll take a look at that and, you know, take your comments into consideration. Looks like Don has a comment.
Yeah, I don't want to take much more time here, but I'm just confused as to why we have anything for the National Park Service in a local government grant program and why that's necessary. We did a conversion, Michelle, you'll probably remember it. It was just of a park that the city took a piece of right away from it, and it took years for that conversion to happen. I mean, years, like 20 years.
I don't think so. I don't think once that we started the paperwork process, I don't think it took 20 years because it was started and done during the period of time when I was doing the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which was from 2013 to 2019. So
That's 5 years.
I thought you said 20. Sorry.
Well, it was 20 years from the time that the land was taken. I mean, the city took the land from us to do the right of way. From the time they took the land to the time it was done. You may be right from the time we did the paperwork, but 5 years is excessive.
So 5 years, you know, if that's how long it takes to process a conversion, is not how long it takes to submit the paperwork, you know, stating that you have a conversion.
Yeah.
So, you know,
yeah, right. I guess, right. If it's just that you have to submit the paperwork and you don't have to wait for approval, I guess I have a less of a concern about it. But I don't know why we need to tie in National Park Service conversion stuff with the local government grant program at all.
As I said before, this is OPRD's administrative rule. We are responsible for administering several grant programs. And particularly, I think the point was brought up that folks are not applying for land and water conservation funds. So, you know, if somebody we need the paperwork filed to let us know to initiate the process, and that hasn't happened yet. That is why that's in here. And it is in here specifically mentioning the land and water program. We would list out all of our programs, but that program has the most, you know, the other conversion requirements attached to our other grant programs are run by us, by the state. And so we can be a bit more flexible with that. But that's why that grant program in particular is called out, because we have to administer it and make sure that we're getting the proper paperwork submitted to us. So that's why. And, you know, I understand that many of you don't agree with that why, but that is the reason.
Michelle, wouldn't it be fair to say that this has been a decision from our upper management that's pretty much been passed down to us?
Well, this has been in place since
day one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's been in here since day one. It is supported throughout the agency. So, but yeah, that is something we'll take all those notes that you have, comments, and take a look at that.
You know, I guess, Michelle, if this is a decision that's coming from upper management, I guess I would just ask that you have a discussion with them to see if we can uncouple the two programs from one another, so that you're not having to deal with any kind of federal restrictions on a state grant program.
I'm sorry, Don, just to clarify, are you asking me to request from the director's office to uncouple this?
I'm just saying, if this is coming down from upper management, if it is a rule that was originally created because upper management wanted to do this to, I guess, force agencies to begin the transfer process, that it be uncoupled from the local government grant program.
Okay, we'll note that in your comment. Yeah, I mean, you know, this is going to go to our, you know, our rulemaking process goes through our director's office and commission.
Yeah,
So,
you know, probably everybody on this phone has had problems with local or with the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and how difficult it is to meet some of those requirements. And I think anytime you see that, you're tying the National Park Service's restrictions in with this, it makes people nervous. It makes me nervous. You know what we went through the last go around. It took forever. And the amount of time it just took to get through the LWCF program, the cost of the project went up more than what the grant was worth.
you're talking about an application process, not a conversion process, though. Just to be clear.
Right. But I think anytime somebody sees that you're tying in the National Park Service's rules into a local government grant program, it just makes them nervous.
Yeah, I don't think we are. This would be our rule, and in order for us to manage our grant programs, it is a way for us to manage all of our grant programs. So we will note that, and then I think we have another hand on this, and then perhaps we can. I don't know if this is the last one, but maybe we can move on for the sake of time, move on to the next section. Steve?
Is that me?
Yeah, I think so.
I wasn't sure if
I wasn't
the
sure
only
if
hand
there
on
was
this.
anybody else.
Sorry about that. No, I think as long as you're noting comments, and the other comment that I would just note, if you don't mind, and I don't mean this in a flippant way, but part of the frustration, I think, from local folks, especially from Jackson County, is that over the years, OPRD has had very long-standing conversions that they've been working with on the LWCF end of things, and they've been continuing to apply for RTP or LWCF monies. So the perception of a little bit of hypocrisy there can rub some of us at the local level a little raw. So I think that is something worth capturing in your notes, at least.
Well, it's noted, however, and I think we can talk about this offline. If you want to explore the OPRD conversions, we actually haven't had any. We don't have any unresolved conversions. We don't have any that haven't been reported or noted, or somehow in the process, but we really don't have any conversions right now. So anyway, just to address that statement. So
Michelle, I don't want to go too far into this. Like I say, it's something we could discuss offline if need be, but in the transfer of Cascadia, there's an open conversion in there that we just had to add language to that to make sure we weren't responsible for inheriting an open conversion on Cascadia. Right.
And paperwork has been filed, and we're aware of that one. Okay. So are we good to move on to the next topic, or does anybody else have any comments on this one?
Okay, well, hey, thanks everyone.
Sorry, I meant to give a thumbs up. That was not a hand.
Okay. Okay.
We really do appreciate all the good feedback, and it's all going to be noted, and a really good discussion. We appreciate that. So thanks. So now where we were referring to earlier, just talking about the composition of the advisory committee and where those folks come from. We just added just a couple little items here. Back to that historically underrepresented community, just gives us a little more flexibility, a little broader than just ethnic diversity of the state's population. Made a note here on point 2A, county representation shall be from lists supplied by the Oregon Park Association and the Association of Oregon Counties. Oregon Park Association no longer exists formally, so we might as well go ahead and strike that. It's been folded into OPRA.
Yeah,
Do we want to add special districts in there?
That's
covered on point C.
And Mark, if we can go back to that one just for a second, where and you're right, OPA doesn't exist anymore, but we are replacing that with the counties section of which I don't know why I didn't get this in here, but there is a county section of Oregon Recreation and Parks Association, but that's for city. So
Right.
I'm saying county representation shall be from lists supplied by the county section of ORPA. That's the one above letter A.
Right. I was just highlighting this to highlight Oregon Recreation and
Mhm.
Park Association.
Okay. So on A, can we make a note to add Oregon OPRA, Oregon Parks ORPA, sorry. County section, possibly. I mean, just make a note there, but that's what we've been doing. That's what we've been doing since OPA has dissolved.
Right. And then we added point E. The department may consult with other appropriate organizations not otherwise listed in subsection A through D for committee membership candidates, just to give us a little more flexibility, because sometimes, you know, we go through these other organizations. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're just not. I mean, they just, you know, don't have anybody to refer to us. So we just added point E to give us a little more latitude to cast a little broader net and to go to other sources. That sound reasonable to everybody?
Works for me.
All righty. Point B. Are we okay with saying all projects must be identified in local comprehensive plans and current master plans? We added the line right before that, or other locally adopted planning documents. We added the or phrase to give us a little more flexibility. Okay, I see a number of hands here. I'm just going to take them in the order that I see them. Ross?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, I think absolutely that makes complete sense.
Which one?
Well, so other locally adopted planning documents I think is important because there is crossover between sequencing of updates to, let's say, a TSP that includes potentially trails or other amenities supporting trails that wouldn't necessarily show up in a parks plan document if the sequence is different than that transportation plan update. So I think that's really important. The other highlighted section about all projects must be identified in local comp plans or current master plans. There could be a question too about timing sequence of this, where a current master plan may have been adopted, but not yet incorporated into a comp plan. So there could be a lag time in there that would preclude applying for funds. So that might read or instead of and. And then I like the flexibility between SCORP and local planning documents and having the ability to point to either or both. I think is advantageous. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I wanted to just respond to that. Do you think that it would be, do you have suggested language there, or do you think we should add all projects must be identified in a local comprehensive plan and current master plan, or again, add that or locally adopted planning documents or something to that effect?
Yes, the portion that's highlighted right now, I think instead of and, putting the word or in there, I think would be important, because there are phases, for example, where the sequencing, where it might be adopted in one say in a master plan or a system plan, but not in the comp plan yet when the cycle opens. And so that would preclude the agency from applying for funds if it's not in both. So the current way it's worded with "and" could be prohibitive, where essentially it's just a process issue on the local level, and it just hasn't gone through that comp plan adoption process yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so I would add the word "or" instead of "and."
Okay.
Do we even need the section that's highlighted?
Well, I would just keep it there for now, Mark, and then just make a note that we have some comments and suggestions on it, because I think, yeah, I'd like to take that and see, you know, how that looks. But yeah, you can, and I'm sure that Ashley's also capturing these comments in here. So it looks like you got a lot of hands to go through here.
Bob?
So I think you could just remove that last part. And the reason I say that is because since I've retired, I've worked with a lot of small organizations. One example is a South Wasco County Park and Recreation District that is, you know, out there running a park all with volunteers. They don't have any planning staff. They're not part of a municipal organization. They've got a park that they took over from a private water company, and they're providing water access. And so I don't know that they would even have a master plan. Working up at Boardman with those guys, they don't have a master plan for their sites, but they're certainly providing recreation and need grant funds. And if you go down to your section H, your new one, if you want to really encourage outdoor recreation opportunities in these small underserved communities, many times they don't have those planning documents to start with. I know we have a planning portion of the grant, but if they don't have one, but they have a need, I think this may be onerous on them to be within having a, you know, comprehensive plan or even a current master plan.
Mm-hmm. Katie, I have a question for you too. Sorry, if we can. So I'm looking at this section actually is really, I believe, to be relating to project selection criteria. And so I actually do think that the part highlighted doesn't, I don't know that is necessary, especially in this section, since it has to do with what we would consider in the criteria or in the application. But I don't know if you have a take on that, Katie.
It looks like it's a scoring criteria. So the committee shall score the applicants using project selection criteria, including but not limited to the following. But when you say must, all projects must be identified, then it does seem like they would have to have that.
So yeah, I would agree that should be removed from this section. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't even know if there's another section that addresses, you know, required documents. That might need to be looked at, you know, changing the wording in it to be an or. But I do believe, Mark, we should make a note to probably delete this from this section, because we don't.
Right, because I don't think this is consistent with the section above, which talks about if scope, then or master plan or other locally planning process even.
Right.
I think we need to make them consistent.
Yeah, so I think we can note that for being deleted.
If I can just jump in here. So there's, yes, I think to the last comment, we do have small communities that don't have park plans or park system plans, and may even just be one park. We currently have that. That is the case in the state. The danger to not requiring planning and not requiring system plans or even plans for one park is that communities get complacent, and we are not forward thinking about the future of our park systems. And so I can give you a great example. The city of Tualatin, where I'm the director. We had a park system plan that had not been updated since 1983. So if this is not a requirement, that's the hazard. We have outdated planning. Cities and agencies are not thinking about the future and not engaging their community in conversations about the future of their park systems. So to the point that was brought up about capacity and ability, and just staffing level and knowledge in communities, that's absolutely correct. But there are ways that in other states that is dealt with. And one of the ways is for the agency governing allocation of grant funds to provide a model system plan template. And this is done regularly in other states. And small communities and small agencies can simply run a very small, short process that checks this box, but doesn't, but still allows communities to keep their system plans updated. And if we don't include a requirement to have updated system plans, that's what's going to happen throughout the state. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's a hazard and it's a problem for communities where if it's not a requirement, it won't happen.
I do believe, Ross, that it is a requirement under the eligible project section of this rule. I don't know if you can scroll back up to that.
So Michelle, is there a time frame that's indicated in terms of renewing or refreshing or updating those system plans or parks elements within a comp plan?
No, I don't believe we have those. They're definitely not in the rule. However, I will say that when we're doing our technical review, if we see, if the planning document that's being referenced is from 1985 or whatever, we would, which is, I mean, it happens, and you're right. I mean, that's the thing is, one, if it's a small community that's eligible for the planning grants, we would make that recommendation that they pursue one of our planning grant opportunities. But
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I would just argue. So a great case study is the city of Tualatin, located in the metro region, Portland metro region, mid-sized city, not short of funding or capacity to do planning work, and we had an outdated plan because it's not a requirement to have an updated plan, and so essentially LGGP is funding projects that were indicated in a system plan from 30 years ago. That I don't know that that's the intent of LGGP.
Yeah, so
just want to throw that out. Something to consider and talk about. If it doesn't show up in this update of rules, I think it's an essential part of how statewide, how local agencies are thinking about the future, engaging community members in that conversation as a goal indicated in SCORP. So just wanted to make sure that that's noted.
Yeah, and and we will note that for sure. However, like this section that Mark has highlighted, like I said, so if we saw something that was 30 years old in there, we would likely ask, because one, that you saw that we were talking about that in the scoring criteria section. So that's going to affect that scoring criteria if you go and say, yeah, this is from our plan from 30 years ago. However, we do give an opportunity in the application for a more recent planning document, like, hey, it's identified in the SCORP, or we're doing this. But yes, I get what you're saying, and we'll note that.
Okay, back to the questions. Don?
My question was right along the line of what Bob was talking about. When I saw that, I had the small agencies on my mind. And in there, it says a SCORP and local plan that has to address both of those. And I completely agree with Bob, there's many of the smaller communities that don't have that. So I'm not even sure I would, it seems unfair to have a smaller community on the scoring criteria be competing with the larger agencies that may have all these plans and they don't get any credit for it. And it's probably unrealistic for some of these communities to have that small planning document. But I also completely agree with Ross. If you don't have something in here to encourage agencies to have these plans, many of them won't. And so I don't know if I have a good answer, but my main one was the word "and" in between SCORP and local park master plan, to have both of those in order to get any kind of credit for it.
Well,
so,
what about the "or" though?
I like "or."
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, not there, Mark.
Yeah, there.
I'm saying, well, okay, that's fine. We can make a note that you would prefer "or," but
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's another "or" right after that. So
Yeah.
you know.
But the way it's written now, they'd have to comply to both, or they wouldn't get any credit.
Extent the project demonstrates conformance with a local and state planning guidelines.
And local.
Comma, the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan and local master plans or other locally adopted planning documents.
Okay, I read that differently.
Okay.
To me, it looks like you'd have to adhere to SCORP and the local plan. To me, it looks like you'd have to do SCORP and one of the others behind it. Yeah, maybe that's the intent. I don't know. That's why I'm kind of mixed here, because I completely agree with what Ross was saying as well, and that encouraging agencies to have these planning documents is a really good thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like this is how we encourage it, and then yet give an option to still apply if you know they have something local, something else locally. But yes, we'll make a note of that.
In my experience, I have never seen a situation where a large agency has a languishing planning document. It's always the small communities that struggle to come through with this. So it's always the small folks that.
Except for the example that Ross just gave us. So.
Well, but we have not seen that come through in an application process.
No.
Okay, let's try to keep these comments brief and move it along. Steve Lambert.
I was gonna concur with Dawn and Bob, and then also just throw in there that we're talking about small entities. You know, some of these smaller entities can also very easily be larger counties with county parks programs that don't have the funds to be able to be looking at doing master planning at the individual park level. So whatever we can do to keep it, you know, encouraged through some of the scoring criteria, but not required. I mean, as much as we all love to plan, you don't need a plan to tell you that you need to replace a 50-year-old bathroom that's out of date and falling apart and not ADA compliant. So there is a little bit of realism there to get some of these projects done for the public as well.
Yep. Okay, Brian Carroll.
Yeah, I concur as well. To me, one of the things you could potentially do, if the concern is with local or smaller programs, maybe you go back to communities under a certain size get bonus points for having a plan in place, and that provides a little bit more encouragement for them to do it, and maybe encourage them to apply for grants, planning grants themselves. And I just also wanted to say, yeah, I'm in favor of stripping out this section of about local comprehensive plans, because at a county level, counties have a document through their planning department that is called a local comprehensive Lynn County, or like the Lynn County Local Comprehensive Plan. And that has very little to do with Parks and Recreation, and none of our stuff is identified in that. And we have been told by our planning department, do not put it in that plan, because then it locks it in solid, and those things don't change for a long period of time. So that's my comment.
Good point. Bob, is your hand still up from earlier, or did you have another comment?
Just quick comment. I think that the other guys have mentioned a couple of things that was on my mind. the other part is, I think, as administrators of the program, if there is a way for us to have available funds that maybe don't even have to go through the review committee for small agencies to do local master planning for their park sites, it might be a good way to utilize these funds. It's sort of, to me, and I've talked to you before, I think, Michelle, about having sort of this extension service type of ability from state parks to help these small communities with these efforts. And I know that we have the ability to put planning grants, but maybe there's something else that we can do in that realm. And the last thing I was going to mention to sort of go along with what Steve was saying, do you really need to have a master plan if you've had a park someplace and for 50 years and you need to replace a structure? And it's not really, it's a matter of, it's been there, it's been the way it's been for that small community. So that's why I think it's just sort of unfair to some of these guys. Same time, Ross, I agree. Anything we can do to encourage master planning, great, but most of it's a funding and capacity issue. And many times, where are those folks going to come from? Are you going to drive out to John Day or to Wasco County to do a master plan from an architectural firm out of Portland or Eugene? Mm-hmm. So just keep that in mind as we go through.
You may already be aware of this, but just to let you know, in the last 3 grant cycles, we always earmark $300,000 for small community planning grants in each of our cycles, and we've been able to fund probably 95% of all the planning grant requests in the last 3 years. So that part has been effective. And then that's where, again, on this point B, where it says other locally adopted planning document, I'd almost rather see it say other locally adopted planning process. Within the application, we do have kind of 4 levels of how a person can qualify on the application. They can either be through how it meets SCORP or their local planning process, or a local planning document, or a local planning process, literally like a grassroots process. So that is an eligibility criteria that we do allow. Ross, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. I think an important distinction to make is the highlighted and local park master plans. It might be important to distinguish whether and as was pointed out, we've got potentially planning that's happening at the site level, and that may not include a system plan. So it might be important to distinguish, to identify a park site plan or a parks system plan in this, rather than just calling it a park master plan. That either would potentially be accepted. That would provide some flexibility for smaller agencies if they're doing planning on a site level or doing planning on a system level, which the word master is being phased out. If you look at many of the consulting firms, they're using the word system now for a system plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, great. Again, great comments, everybody. Sure appreciate that.
Ms. Ross, is that just a old hand or you have a new? Okay.
Cover everybody. Looks like we have. Okay, that brings us down to the end of the document. So I'm going to scoot back up to the top. This is all pretty much standard. If you notice, we added normal wear and tear on point 16, clarification on major rehabilitation.
Yeah, that's where we took out language that was recommended by the RAC to take out.
And on point 2 here, we left it at increasing the maximum grant from 750,000 to 1 million. Was there any further discussion on that? Was that definitive?
I think that was proposed by several folks to go up to 1.5. So it looks like maybe that was, you guys decided 1 million was best from your perspective.
We did have, I was looking at the notes and we had comments on both. There were both comments from this RAC on 1.5 and 1. And 1 is what was originally in the draft, you know, to increase from 750. Kind of looking at, I think that I agree with the 1 million because I do believe that it could really, even though we're getting a huge increase in funding, it really could feed into what's available, left available for small grant projects. I'm sorry, for smaller projects. You know, if we get a lot of even a couple 1.5 million requests. So it seems like, you know, originally in the beginning of this program, it was 500,000. It got raised to 750,000. Seems like a good progression to go up to another 250,000 to $1 million instead of, I think, what, doubling it.
Comment, Don?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still in favor of bumping it up a little bit more than that. I don't know if we need to go to 1.5 or not, which is what I originally suggested. But I looked at the $750,000 number and I sent Michelle an email earlier in the week asking for what year it was that they changed it to 750,000, and it was in 2008. So I went to the Engineers News Record Construction Cost Index, and I indexed it for every year from 2008 to now, and that would have raised it to 1,101,000. So we're pretty close at $1 million, but it's still even less than what it would have been in 2008. So I think, given that we're doing this now for the future, the index also, it doesn't count current year, and so current year we're also in another high inflationary year. So I would suggest even bumping that up a little bit more than where it is now. The same thing is true with the smaller grant. The smaller grant, I think you went from, what was it? You went from, was it 75 to 100?
Yes.
I think that's right. So the smaller grant, it would have been 110,000 would have been comparable to $2008 numbers. So, I mean, you could even bump that up a little bit more as well if you want to at least have a grant program that provides the spending power that we had in 2008.
So the small grant the small grant was increased from 50,000 to 75,000 in 2011 or 12, whenever those were. And so that was more recently updated, because it was, for a while, it was at 750 for large and 50 still for small.
Yeah, and then that would apply that well. I didn't do it for land acquisition because there's not an index really that looks at land, and it varies so much across the state. I don't think that you can really look at an index to figure out what that number ought to be. But I think you can on construction pretty well. Even within different communities, it's different than the index, of course, but at least the index is region wide. So you can kind of get an idea region wide of how much construction has gone up since 2008.
Okay, so noted.
So I guess my recommendation may be move it to 1.25. That, and we're talking about a maximum amount here. That doesn't mean the grant committee is going to give out a whole bunch of grants to that higher dollar amount, but it does give them the flexibility to do that. Another reason why I think that we should do it is, given that the amount of grant dollars could be doubling, you know, in the very near future, we want to make sure that you're giving all that money out to the local communities, and we could very well have a lot of cycles where we have more money than we have grants to give out. So I think increasing that money would be good. And also, if you don't, I think State Parks is going to have a lot of grant applications to manage over the years. Maybe that's a good thing that you have more to manage, but it's going to increase your staff. And as you guys know, you can't charge staff time to this program. So I think there's some good reasons to bump it up a little bit higher.
Yeah, we're a little apprehensive about having too many grant projects to manage.
I would concur with Don on that, going to 1.25 when we're talking about the future. I thought last time 1.5 was too much. I think 1.25 would be fine when we're talking about the cost index that he just brought forward and thinking out the future for this amount. So I could concur with that.
Okay, so noted. Thank you.
Mark, as long as you're making notes, you can mark down that I concur with both of those gentlemen as well.
Same for me, Mark.
And Mark, will you put a note in there? I don't have the, I don't want to wordsmith on the fly here just because we're down to our last 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But I would maybe look at it as then changing the language in this to something that says up to. I know that it does kind of say that, but when we have this in rule, these are the numbers we put in our manual. And so I would prefer to have the flexibility to, make the offering up to 1 point, whatever that you wrote down that they were suggesting. Potentially, we do need to look at this because we have in the past just this is the funding we offer. So I don't know if we want to implement a higher amount than 1 million immediately because we don't know when that 25% will necessarily kick in and if we'll stay at that and that kind of thing. So just I don't know that you need to wordsmith it right here, Mark. Just make a note for that. I'd like to look at having the possibility of not necessarily,
Sure. Okay. Done.
Okay.
Mark, with that said, you got it under 4. You've got that flexibility built in.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's there at that point. So you do have that flexibility to go up or down. So
Okay.
keep that in mind.
Okay. Number 5, I don't know if there's a reason to keep that. I think that was a carryover from back when we used to operate more on a biennium type structure. So I don't know if 0.5 is even necessary.
I don't recall us taking that out.
I just did.
Oh, I don't believe that that's what that's from. That wasn't in there from when we were doing it on a.
Do you know what purpose it serves?
Yes, it does. It's kind of a way for us to. It was added in not in the last rulemaking, but I think the one in 2012. I'd have to go back and look, but that was intentionally added. If there are projects that needed to be done very quickly. And so, I think it was at a time when maybe projects were coming up very quickly. And so that could give preference to a project that could get done in 12 months.
Okay, want to leave it in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's more, it's probably an important piece there. I think what that was more about, Michelle, was we need to get projects out and we want to prioritize those projects because we're getting the in, for instance, that was maybe right before the renewal. So we wanted to see the dollars on the ground and not sitting in somebody's coffers. So actually seeing projects happen. So I don't think it's a bad thing to leave in there.
Yeah.
It's an option.
Yeah. And it's to address, like you said, like shovel ready projects, because we also fund projects that are, have a little bit more like refinement of their design and engineering to do. And so, we could prioritize projects that were like just really ready to go, like right away.
Okay. There's some discussion on 0.6 that's highlighted there. I don't remember the background. Any comments on that?
I think in the original language, Mark, it just said the director may dedicate. I think a few of us had suggested in consultation with the committee. I thought that was what was discussed.
That's what, so I highlighted, so basically anything that you see that we've already addressed, which is everything now, where you see a highlighted part, that's where I changed it from the first draft based on the comments from
Okay.
last time. So that was it. The in consultation with was added.
So just minor changes. We took out the climate change clause.
Mark, speaking of the climate change clause, what's the thinking in terms of how climate focused projects, climate adaptation or resiliency, climate resiliency projects, call them, within parks, how those specific projects are potentially funded by LGGP or not? How are those considered then if it's not listed?
This hasn't even really been addressed yet. This is a new item. We do have an area of, a category for sustainability. That's probably the most likely place where this would be addressed, or just in the general section, just leading right off with the project narrative. Things that we might see coming in would be additional shade, additional tree landscaping, shade, picnic shelters for shade purposes, cooling areas within a park, splash pads. So,
and we are in the middle of a new SCORP process, which will help inform our scoring criteria here. And so I don't know if any of you are on that, have received any information about that, but that could be a good place to address it. But yeah, I think right now through our sustainability process, and this was really just, I think, adding another document to that list of possible documents you could utilize. Like your local comprehensive plan or master plan or SCORP. And then that was going to be added as, another plan, but we also have kind of generally put in there another local planning document. So that covers all kinds of planning documents. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no, thank you. I think, yeah, if climate resiliency or mitigation projects within parks shows up in SCORP, or if that's discussed either in the scoring criteria, there are a growing number of agencies throughout the state that are doing specific projects for climate resiliency. So one simple example is a irrigation controller, smart irrigation controllers. And you talked about trees, and so there's a growing list of agencies that are focused on this work within parks, and there's not a funding source at either LGGP or any other source. So just wanted to make sure that that's discussed. If it's in SCORP, then it's eligible for LGGP funds. Thanks.
Yeah, and ultimately it's a recreation program, and so I'm sure you all understand that it has to have that recreational recreation is the primary focus of this. It doesn't mean climate resiliency items aren't necessarily mutually exclusive from recreation. So I don't necessarily think, it kind of just depends. Like if a project came in and it was like 100%, like a climate resiliency project with no recreation elements, that's what we're trying to avoid.
So Michelle, I guess then this brings up the question, and maybe to just take note in terms of the SCORP process, there is a glaring gap for climate resiliency projects throughout the state. And that if this is not the tool for agencies to use to help make the transition in terms of water use, in terms of carbon capture projects, and so on and so forth, where is that source? So I just wanted to make note of that and emphasize that this is a growing conversation throughout the state. Thanks.
My two thoughts on that. I guess I was confused last time we were talking about this, kind of to the point that Michelle brought up. This is a Parks and Recreation grant program. So much of what I've heard over the past several months talked about on climate adaptation projects, et cetera. If they're outdoor recreation, elements, then they're eligible. But if we're looking to put solar panels on City Hall, I don't necessarily think this is the right program to do that. There are other programs out there through, nonprofits, et cetera. So my concern is if we start using the local government grant program for climate adaptation projects outside that are not park and recreation related, boy, we're opening up a can of worms, and that doubling of that revenue for parks is going to get diluted really quickly.
Yeah, it's a good point, Steve. We won't be doing that. Everything has to have like Michelle said, it's got to have a recreation connection. And it is an evolving area. And this current score very well may likely inform how we treat this going forward, but it will have to still have a recreation component connection to it. Okay, again, these are all just pretty much basic housekeeping type things, is all just some syntax changes.
Yeah, anything highlighted in yellow would have been like, I think somebody had requested before we met this time to get what, we incorporated in or put into the draft. And so words, yeah, this one.
So this is kind of back where we started, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is everyone confident that comfortable that we have covered the waterfront here?
Yeah, and I think that's good. I don't know if anybody else has comments, that's fine, but we still have a couple items we need to cover before we wrap up at noon.
So do you want to jump back to where we were in the PowerPoint then?
I believe so.
Do you see the PowerPoint? Am I still sharing? Okay, thank you. Whoops. Is this where you wanted to pick up, Michelle?
We need to make sure that we do the fiscal and economic impact questions. I don't know that those are on that one.
Yeah, I don't have my slideshow in front of
You're right,
me.
they're not. I thought we interjected those in there, but we did not. So
okay, that's probably on the agenda. So yeah, we should do that before these next steps.
I have the questions if you want me to just go through them.
That'd be great.
Great. So one legal requirement if you convene a RAC is that we have to ask the RAC members what your thoughts are on the fiscal and economic impact of the proposed rules. So the question, and I can share my screen if you want, Mark, if you want to.
I'm trying to get out of mine.
I think I can share until you.
You might have to override me.
Yes.
Oh, here we go. There we go. I got it. Okay.
Do you see my questions?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question we have is, do you think of other state agencies that are economically affected by this rule change? And I got to make sure I can see your answers or your hands. And you can just feel free to speak up. This is often a very awkward conversation because many of our rules don't actually have a giant economic impact, but it is a requirement that we talk about these things. So any thoughts on state agencies that are economically affected by the proposed rules? OPRD? Any others? And units of local government economically affected by the rules? Any that apply?
And in a positive way.
Any members of the public that are affected? And then the last one, we have two more questions. Are there small businesses that are affected?
Hey, Katie, what you're saying, are they affected? Do you mean in a negative way?
It can be either.
I mean,
Positive
like,
or negative.
of course, local communities are affected in a positive way by
Mhm.
what we're doing here. When you were reading those, I was just trying to think of who is negatively affected. I think there's a lot of people that are positively affected by the rule change.
I'll write some things about impacted positively. But are there small businesses that are affected by the rules that you can think of?
I would think that once again, it'd be a positive effect if we're trying to get increase economic activity, and both by use of the parks as well as the construction projects that are going on.
And
So
what types of small businesses do you work with when you utilize the grants?
Small local construction companies, small local suppliers of hardware, HVAC, electricians, pretty much you name it, that deal with any kind of utilities and construction are going to be going to see some help from this.
Consulting firms, small consulting firms,
In fact, that's the same thing for equipment suppliers.
engineers, those type.
Yeah, sporting good equipment suppliers,
Yeah.
Coffee shops, gas stations. I mean, particularly if these things draw people into your community, there's a local impact in a positive way.
Yeah, for us, anybody that's involved in tourism is going to benefit in a positive way.
Okay.
Hundreds, if not thousands. How many?
The only negatives I could see in this, Katie, from what I see, is if we've made any of the rules more restrictive, and I don't think we've made it more restrictive. We've made it more open, if I remember right.
Okay. That helps. And then the last question is one that we have started asking because it's a new part of the filing notice. We have to review if the adoption of these rules have an effect on racial equity in the state. And can you think of anything specific around racial equity that these rules would impact positively, negatively?
Katie, I would think it would have a positive effect when we're putting more money into our local communities as opposed into maybe the larger statewide. It's reaching those local communities from a diversity equity standpoint more directly.
I think a lot of local communities too are looking at equity within their own communities for siting parks. And this helps to site those parks in those economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. Same thing with connectivity with the trail systems, is that you're connecting economically disadvantaged communities to our park system as a whole.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe, didn't we add some language into the makeup of the committees and whatnot, specifically encouraging more diversity and equity?
True.
Committees.
Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts on the fiscal impact of these rules, or economic impacts, or racial equity impacts? Okay. Well, thank you very much. That is the one legal requirement of convening a RAC. So
Katie, can I add one thing, or maybe, that's probably for Michelle and Mark, but I think at some point it would be really good to have someone like Eco Northwest come in and do an assessment of the local government grant program and look at what the economic impact is on local communities statewide, on what this investment does to local communities, because I think you'll find that for every dollar we invest in these local communities, it brings a lot of money back into those communities. And it would be really good if we could use that to sell to our representatives that, set laws around park and recreation to show them that we can bring a lot of economic impact and gain to our communities by making these kinds of investments. And I don't know if that's something that state parks, would do, or some support agency could come in and help state parks do something like that, but I think it would be really good.
I think that's a great idea, Don. Just to second what you said. Bringing in a group to do that analysis. The other way that communities are now doing this is aggregated mobile phone data and looking at visits of a particular park before and after a particular investment is made funded by LGGP. And we know anecdotally when park use is picked up after a particular project. And I can cite the exact one in City of Tualatin, our splash pad project that was funded by LGGP. It's just absolutely packed. But getting that actual data, I think, would tell a really interesting, compelling story for the value of LGGP, because it really is valuable.
It's an interesting idea, and maybe there's something we can work with either ORPA or the Office of Outdoor Rec if we wanted to do it on a broader recreation provider perspective.
Yep.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I would recommend broadening that out to all your grant programs if possible, especially if you work with Office of Outdoor Rec.
Good suggestion.
Good. Well, now, Mark, you can go back to the PowerPoint. That was the one thing I needed to make sure we
Very
had.
good. Well, no, thank you, Katie. Thanks for doing that.
Need to unmute. I think I'm presenting these last slides when we get those back up. So this is just about the next steps and what we're doing next. So the full comments will be available on the agency rulemaking website, and I don't know when that happens. And then the public comments are accepted until November 3rd. And then the comments will be compiled and shared with the commission. And a staff report will go to the commission with a recommendation on revisions to the proposed rules. And so the commission could vote to adopt the rule changes as proposed. They could make amendments based on comments received, seek additional public comment on rule changes, or choose not to move forward with the proposed rule changes at this time. So those are all the things that could happen.
And we put the comments that we receive on a weekly basis. So once the rules open up on October 1st, then every Friday we'll post any comments that are received on our website.
Okay, I think you can go back to that next slide, Mark. And so this is, so this is where the comments are submitted, or how they can be submitted. And the comments are going to be accepted October 1st through November 3rd. Is that right? Okay, we updated that. Thank you. Okay, now you can go to the timeline. So we did have today is the second part of the Rules Advisory Committee meeting. On the 14th of September, we'll be going to, or Katie will be presenting a brief requesting permission to go to open rulemaking. And actually, it's just for Division 6 at this time, as we decided to do a separate process for the County Opportunity Grant Program. And then a notice of proposed rulemaking will be made available in the Secretary of State's bulletin. And And then there'll be a rules hearing, and that will be a virtual public hearing to provide opportunity to ask questions and provide oral comments, and a recording of the hearing will be made available on the agency rulemaking website. And then in order to be able to speak at that hearing, I believe, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to sign up ahead of time to do that. Or I guess in order to speak, they have to do that, or they can just.
It will be live streamed on YouTube, so you can watch it, or yes, register. It'll be through Zoom, so you can register just like you did this way if you want to speak.
Yes, and then there'll be also a PowerPoint presentation done at the opening of that public hearing, and so just to kind of go over overview of what we're doing here. I believe, unless we have anything else for the good of the order, I believe that might be it. Bob? Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. I just
Okay.
was going to ask, I had a question. Will you be sending an email, or somebody from your staff send an email to us giving notice of those, just as just to make sure that we're aware, versus us having to be proactively looking for it? Are we on an email list of any type to be aware of this stuff?
We can include you on I send out an email to the interested parties when the rule is open, so I'll make sure to send it to the RAC members as well. That will have all of the dates and how to participate in the hearing and all of that.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Michelle, I just have a question. The financial forecast was released for the state earlier this week. And do you guys know what the impact was on the revenue for lottery dollars and how that might affect the implementation of the increased dollar amount for this program?
I haven't seen that report yet, and I haven't talked to our budget analyst about that, but I don't know if Katie might know more.
I do know that it went up slightly for this current biennium, and then it is down for the forecast is down for the future biennium. But I was trying to look at what the threshold was. I don't know that I don't think it affects the trigger point, but that doesn't mean that's the forecast. It doesn't necessarily mean, I still don't think we know for sure, I guess is the point.
Okay.
But it's down. They are predicting it to go down in future biennium from what it was. And it was down, I think for the 23-25, it was down like 15.
I think, even if it does postpone the trigger, I think it's good that we've gone through this process. And I just wanted to thank everybody for including us as a part of this. And I think it's going to be great for local communities. And if there's anything that we can do or ORPA can do to help ensure your success in the program, we'll be glad to help.
Thanks, Don. Did I see another? I thought I saw another hand, but no other comments, questions.
Ross, did you have a hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to
there we
echo
go.
again. Yeah, thank you very much. This is a fantastic opportunity. We really, really value this program. This program is really transformational for so many communities in the state. And so this process is really open, transparent for everyone to understand and gain a better appreciation for the work you all put in to make this happen for communities across the state. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, we really appreciate your volunteering to do this RAC. I know it's a lot of extra work and takes time, taking a couple days worth of time out of your schedule. And, we really value the input you've had in this process. So thank you for volunteering to do this. We've got some really great comments from you. We've noted some more comments today. And really great ideas. And so, yeah, you all have been fantastic. So thank you for your participation in this. Okay, well, staff, anybody else, anything to add or before we finish for the day?
This kind of feels like the final wrap up, so I'll just echo everything that Michelle just said. Boy, we sure appreciate your contribution to this. We've value all your feedback. We've noted everything, and it gives us good things to consider moving forward. And we appreciate your time and effort.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Steve, you can go back to your vacation now.